Welcome to LeaderIQ, where we share the stories of leaders in brand and retail so you can learn what led them to find success in their careers while giving you an intimate look at how they made foundational decisions along the way. This show is hosted by Guru Hariharan, who is the founder and CEO of Commerce IQ. Guru has spent most of his career working as a leader at companies like Amazon and eBay before becoming an entrepreneur himself. This podcast is brought to you by Commerce IQ, a company which Guru started in 2019 that has become the e-commerce operating system for brands like Logitech, Johnson & Johnson, Kellogg's, Mars, Duracell, and many more. If you're interested in learning more, check out commerceiq.ai. With that, let's get to the show. Today's guest is Global Chief Digital Officer at Mars, Sandeep Dadlani. This interview is super fun. As a small fun fact, turns out Guru and Sandeep actually grew up in the same city. We covered topics about what it was like growing up, covering Sandeep's 16 years at Infosys, where he oversaw retail and CPG, before his now 4.5 year stint at Mars, where he's been leading the digital arm of that business. They cover so many different topics. I'm excited for you guys to hear more about it. So here is Sandeep with your host, Guru Hariharan.
It's a pleasure to have you. I have seen you from the outside in watching your career grow over the last few years, and it's been jaw-dropping, frankly. And I have been waiting for this podcast to really understand the story behind Sandeep Dadlani and how did you sort of make it to being the CDO of a top 10 CPG. But thanks so much for being on our show.
Well, I'm glad somebody is finally interested in my career. So thank you for giving me that opportunity, Guru. No, it's a pleasure to be with you, and in fact, to see Commerce IQ's success and growth and your success and growth as well. So this is mutual.
Really appreciate that. Yeah. And we like to be early adopters. So we are going to be hopefully unraveling a lot of the types of the stories that we may not have had a chance to talk about. So Sandeep, I was talking about a surprise that I had earlier, and I didn't want to break it before we get into the podcast. So it turns out you and I grew up in the same city in India, in Baroda. And so it's
no
crazy.
way. You're kidding me.
Yes. So, and just for the audience, now we are talking about a fourth tier city, not even first, second tier, third tier. It's a small little village. 0.0001% of the population lives there, and it's like hidden somewhere. And here we are. So two folks.
Familiar. I remember in a kite flying festival, someone stealing my kites. That must be you.
There you go. That must have been it. So, but one thing, Sandeep, I remember as I was thinking about this podcast and how to talk about Baroda, I think while it was a very small and in the nondescript city, what I found in every single person and what was there, which I kind of frankly miss in a lot of the other cities, including the United States that I've lived in, is the level of ambition that people had in themselves. So anyway, I hope to sort of, I'm not surprised. So you're the Chief Digital Officer of Mars today. But I'm kind of really curious about that. So maybe we can just start over there, Sandeep, growing in Baroda. How was it like?
Well, yeah, you're right. Baroda is a special city. I was born in Bombay, and then my father, who used to work at Siemens forever, decided to start his own entrepreneurial venture, a manufacturing setup in Baroda. Baroda was, great in terms for entrepreneurs, ambitious entrepreneurs, and Baroda also, it just was a city that had a lot of time for each other, for pursuing your hobbies, your ambitions, and so on and so forth. So I did my electronics engineering in Baroda, believe it or not, and made a lot of lifelong friends there. I don't know why we didn't bump into each other. Maybe you're much younger. Let's just keep it at that. There are 2-3 things that Baroda taught me. One was, it's a small city, but it's important in any city, big or small, to have friendships. Baroda is all about friendships. Some of my best friends are in Baroda. And the second thing is you can come from anywhere. It doesn't matter. What matters is where you're going next. And I thought those two things embody the spirit of Baroda in many senses. Does that make sense?
It totally does, and I really resonate with that. I think the thing that you're talking about is a mix of ambition and friendship, and also a purpose of what you're going to be doing next. I think that's really well summarized. I think looking back, that also sums it up for me as well, growing up there.
Yeah.
Great. And while growing there, so now if you sort of look back and your early upbringing, are there some things that you remember in terms of what your sort of family values were, and maybe a few things that your parents always stressed on that you grew up and became a part of your DNA?
Yeah, look, I mean, we grew up in middle class, surroundings. Both my parents worked full time, very hard. They both came back home after 8 p.m. Every night, and then cooked up dinner of some sort. And so it was a pretty, I wouldn't say it was tough, but it was intense as an experience. Just like any other Indian household, academic performance was, supreme. So you either come first, or you get 100 out of 100, or you're a failure. And there's no other sort of middle gear involved. And so that was supreme. I loved cricket and I loved Bollywood growing up. That was definitely part of it. But the one thing I remember my dad doing was to always take me to any local public speeches that were being given, saying, look how this person speaks. Look how they tell their story, how they could be more inspirational, how they could do this better. And we used to then spend hours analyzing the speech. And the speech may be political or religious or business, that didn't matter. The content per se didn't matter as much as the narration style. And I thought, that's one of my best memories of realizing the importance of conveying a message as clearly as possible. So I remember that from my upbringing.
That is amazing, Sandeep. I actually personally got to understand and appreciate the value of storytelling, and maybe when I turned 40, perhaps. Like, it's crazy that your father was such a visionary in like really explaining to you and putting that in you. What do you think drove that sort of need in the family to actually talk about storytelling, narration? Those are very powerful things to learn and pick up in the early stages of your career.
No, look, my father is an engineer, and by the way, a much better engineer till date than I am. He can actually, completely analyze a circuit, and he does consultancy today for a lot of engineering firms. But what he realized in his corporate career was that at a certain point in time, when you get into leadership positions, you depend on a larger group of people to deliver. Like you in Commerce IQ depend on your team to deliver. Now, guess what? The big secret in life is your team is not going to deliver just because you asked them to, or you paid them to, or you instructed them to. No, they're going to deliver if they want to. That's it. And why would they want to? You, me, your teams, and my teams are built in a way that we want to do something, and then we just give in 120%, and that is difficult for an AI to capture. That is difficult for an algorithm to capture. There is a certain magic in human connection, in the story, that then motivates people to go beyond and above, and we've all had those experiences. And so his emphasis to me always was, just try and convey ideas in a way that people want to, and that was it.
Sandeep, that's such a profound statement, I got to say. Although it's like it might seem trite, and I used to be one of those who thought like, well, every problem in the world can be solved with a hammer called problem solving, and I would go out, whether it's a relationship issue at home, whether it's a people management issue at work. I know, well, this could be problem solved. Let's actually break down the problem and try to solve it. How do we? But very recently, Sandeep, I realized, and actually I'm doing this, there's a famous course called Touchy Feely which is one of the start courses of Stanford GSB. And the professor over there has actually created a nonprofit where she's actually training leaders with dependent or interpersonal relationships on how to utilize empathy to drive great relationships and hence effectiveness in what we do. And really that one dimension that came out was kind of the heart, which is it's not everything is through the brain. In fact, if you sort of have a good shade of gray, and if you look around in the world, everything's a shade of gray, it's not black or white. And that has really, frankly, really just given a step function change in how I have been operating as a person, also personal happiness. So it's very profound, and all for our audience. This is one thing which I would which I would like to really emphasize on what Sandeep said. So thanks for sharing that.
And now we're beginning to return back to the office, Guru, and I'm getting this whole sort of goosebumpy feeling again when you're in a room physically with somebody whiteboarding for a change, and it's unlocked so many levels that I feel, oh my God, this 13-inch screen, it was so depressing for 2 years, and we are back in flesh and blood and exciting each other and laughing and chuckling. So I cannot tell you how much we lost a bit of empathy through the screens, and we're getting it back. And I feel, I hope, I wish we all become more empathetic leaders. It's perhaps the biggest leadership quality I've learned or tried to learn. Yeah.
Totally. No, that's very well said. Sandeep, I want to go back to that point that you made around if you're not 100 on 100, you're not good enough. And that was frankly the upbringing a lot of our Asian parenting, and I grew up through a similar thing. I'm curious, how is that impacting your view of life, and do you have a family at this point?
Yeah, my two girls are 19 and 15.
How does that impact that upbringing and learning and all that? That's what got you here, but then you look back and go, well, there are certain things which I want to push for and certain things I want to pull back. So I'm curious, like, how is that impacting your parenting?
Look, it's not easy, and at least I haven't figured out the balance. This last weekend, I visited my daughter in university in Illinois, and she had a lot of exams coming up, but she said, I'm going to give you 5 hours to spend with me. And I said, okay, let's make this the best 5 hours of our life. And we went for a manicure, pedicure together. I still have some painted nails with
nice.
her.
There you go.
And we went shopping, and then we had a meal, and so on and so forth. I think my parents would have said, study for those 5 hours and get 100. And I think, we have got to be careful how we balance this idea of learning and empathy and teaching people how to think versus just teaching people how to score a grade. And there are no right answers. I think the 100 out of 100 expectation built in me a certain work ethic, which I'm now helplessly devoted to. You can't now get out of that. You just work, and you have a simple machine learning causality there. If you work, you will get. That's it. But what I'm hoping to build in my kids is, yes, that work ethic is invaluable. But with it, the idea of having unique experiences, of having unique, delightful experiences, empathetic experiences is equally delightful. And the last piece is, I wish they would listen to me, but that's a different story.
No, I think that's very well said. I think it's a combination of what the stories and experience that they go through, what are they remembering as time with you. It kind of ends up forming lifelong, stronger bonds, especially in this day and age where there are so many distractions. It's probably even more important at this point to emphasize on that. So that's very well said, Sandeep. Thanks for sharing your parenting tips with us. So with that, like, you went to engineering school in Baroda, and then you decided to get an MBA. So why not jump in as an engineer? What was going on over there where you actually wanted to get an MBA and get into management?
Most of my friends were, after an engineering degree, shooting for a master's degree in the US and leaving for the US. And I used to really poo-poo them, saying, why would you leave your country when there are so many opportunities in India? And a lot of people in India were switching from engineering to MBAs, because India at that time was not a big manufacturing place as such, but services were taking off, and banks were taking off, and consulting firms were taking off. So I'll confess, it wasn't great thinking. I just followed the crowd and said, yeah, what might look sexy after an electronic engineering degree? An MBA in finance. And so I jumped into an MBA quickly, and actually enjoyed it as well for a couple of years. So that was logic. I wish it was more sort of thoughtful and by design, but I just went with the flow.
And as you sort of, Sandeep, as you sort of look back and you said, I think a lot of us, I would say, we followed the kind of quote unquote playbook that were written out for us and as we grew up. And at some point we start to realize that, gosh, like life's not a playbook. You're not racing to the end, which is also called death. Let's actually sit back and smell the roses for a little bit. Has there been some thoughts that you've gone through, like when in terms of like at what point would you actually stop playing the role and following the playbook?
No, look, this is huge. I think early on in both my MBA school and then I joined Citibank, which was the first company that came to campus. The race was on. You were always racing. And it was as if the current team around you, you're racing, and if you get ahead, you get some strange sort of satisfaction, which, by the way, disappears exactly a few seconds later. But in every race, I found a lot of people smarter than me. In MBA school, some of my classmates were absolutely brilliant and fantastic. And oh, by the way, they were much better communicators. And I was like, wow, how do I compete with these guys? I joined Citibank. I mean, some of the best talent in MBA schools went to Citibank at that time. From Citibank, I went to Infosys, same thing. So what I've realized, unfortunately, over life is that, look, you're never going to be the best. There is no such person. Maybe there is one person on the planet. She probably doesn't know it yet. So there's always somebody ahead of you. There's always someone behind you. And the race is consistent. The race is good because it gives you a lot of adrenaline, ambition to create, to innovate, to drive new experiences, to push yourself and check your own limit. But you are checking your own limit. That's all there is. There is nobody else around you really. And I forget this sometimes. I'm trying to remind myself all the time. But once you realize that, then you're always simply calibrating yourself, like you're calibrating your own body, your own physique, your own mind. And I think after those first couple of 3 experiences where somebody got promoted before me, or somebody got higher grades than me, or somebody got a better campus placement than me, you then realize you were just running a lonely race, and you were just racing with yourself. And today, I think I'm still very ambitious, want to get ahead, but every once in a while, it's useful to calibrate and remind yourself that this is not a race with anybody else. And it really is liberating once you remind yourself that.
I think that's, I feel very resonated with that, what you just said. I think at the end of the day, human race over the last 250,000 years that we've evolved, it's always been survival of the fittest. So the quote unquote racing is kind of in our DNA, if you may, and you can't do much about it. But what you're saying is that, gosh, like if you try to follow a playbook and if you're trying to sort of compare yourself against one another, then you're not essentially playing an authentic game for yourself. And maybe change that race a little bit, make it more authentic to yourself, make it more fun, and makes you shine more. I like the sort of the little shift that you made on the race, that don't stop racing. It's not about, don't be anti-human in that, but actually change the turf a little bit.
Ideally, yes. And I wish we remember this all the time. I wish I remember it all the time. It's tough to, your natural instincts have been trained and honed to race. That's how we're all built.
And Sandeep, you got your MBA and then you ended up at Citigroup as your first job out of college. What's the story behind that?
It literally was the first company to come to campus. And again, that race, right? Look, let's be candid. You want to get into that first company that comes to campus and tell the 20, 30, 40 friends and family around you that you got into the first. I did not research Citibank. I did not understand their culture. I did not understand whether that year they'd made a massive profit. In fact, right now the headlines are they're pulling out of Asia, which is, I mean, at some level it's horrible. Yeah, I was vain and conceited enough at that time to say, let me get into the first company, and I got in, and I was like, okay, cool, I got in. Now, Citibank was amazing because of the variety of experiences it gave me for the first 4 or 5 years. I did cash management, I did operations. Oh, by the way, I bungled up a lot of operations. I made lots of mistakes. I had some tough nights after making a lot of mistakes. I recovered. I managed products. I raised IPO money for a lot of software companies. India was going through a big software consulting boom, and there were a lot of IPOs that I personally handled. So to pack in that level of experience in one stint in 4 years, I wouldn't trade it for anything else. It was really, really a great learning experience, and some really good friends till today.
So it looks like that serendipitous or kind of following that playbook actually landed you in something which was very valuable to you. And I think that's a great life lesson. It's not just, I think, asking the question on why for your life and very early on may not be the right time. So maybe even going through a first portion of your life and then looking back may actually give you purpose. So it's a very interesting journey and great journey that you talked about. And then from there you moved to Infosys, and looks like you found a home there. Tell us about the story about how did you end up at Infosys, and what was your journey like there?
So again, I wish it was a brilliant reason. My wife, her job had taken her to the US at that time. And her stint in the US kept getting extended. And she said, look, this is not going to end. Either I'll have to quit or you'll have to quit. And so for the record, I said, I will quit, and I will now try to come to the US. Now, look, I had made fun of friends who had gone to the US all my life, saying, why the heck would you leave a country full of opportunity like India and go to the US? Lo and behold, I was trying to get into the US. So Citibank actually was very flexible and offered me a position somewhere in the US. And I was like, now that I'm leaving and restarting, let me try something new. Infosys at that time was, if I remember right, a $300 million startup. It had a great reputation. Mr. Murthy had this very early on, this image of a very values-driven company. I identified with that. I had grown up with those values, and I said, you know what, I want to join. This is an interesting company. They were looking for business development people in the US. I interviewed and I got through, and they placed me in Atlanta. And I spent 17 years in Atlanta, and Infosys grew from, 300 million to, when I left, close to 11 billion. So we grew 30 times in 17 years. And living through that growth cycle, again, was very valuable experience. I enjoyed it every bit.
That's a crazy amount of growth that you saw. And can you unravel that values-driven company a little bit more? I think a lot of us really aspire to build values-driven companies. And certainly Mr. Murthy's journey has been talked about a lot, and looks like you got a front row seat to that. Can you unravel that for us a bit?
Look, Mr. Murthy is one of my top inspiring leaders, mentors that I've ever worked with. And I've had the fortune of working with him closely. I think what people get about Mr. Murthy is this sense of values and integrity with which he built a company, and the leadership teams he built, and the company he's built. I think what a lot of people may miss, especially if you're not close with him, is his ability to spot young talent and then give it ridiculous responsibility and then wait for magic to happen. I mean, I'd nail his formula, whether he admits it or not, to that formula. He could take high potential young talent, cut through any bureaucracy and empower them, mind-bogglingly, sometimes scarily. So that was great. And the second thing was, I mean, look, a lot of people talk about integrity, but I've seen him at close quarters taking high integrity decisions, which may sometimes cost us business. This whole idea of the clearest, the best sleep or the clearest conscience is the softest pillow, was inbuilt. A lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that, especially when you're desperate to try and build a big company or a successful company. I've never seen him confused on that. It was almost like, yeah, I mean, this is a straightforward decision. Why would we even be perplexed about it? We're not crossing the line. No, we're not even getting close to the line. That was super clear. And I enjoyed that. I think he helped drove, the best leaders help drive clarity into your thinking model, your mental model. He's one who's done that for me, which I feel very privileged to be part of.
And I think just to sort of open it up a bit more, Sandeep, I think when we grew up, and then certainly when I look back at my upbringing, I think this entire concept of integrity was not taken for granted. We cannot, because there was bribery in India on almost everything that we did, whether we went to an electricity board or a driver's license or to getting your job, a government job. And so I think this, the thing that you're talking about, integrity, when there's a dog eat dog world out there to where others are willing to cross the line, I think that is very powerful, and that I would imagine how much that clarity and respect that would have driven in the company, in the company just standing for that.
I would like to believe, by the way, I think this applies to any country in any business environment. Even in the US right now, you see, large media platforms powered by AI can amplify intent in any which way they want. And so this is where integrity comes into play. I'm hoping, the teams I touch, I inspire, I develop, I partner with, keep that front and center in terms of doing good with all the superpowers that we are building around us. So I'm super inspired by that. Yeah.
And Sandeep, one thing that you talked about, which I also want to unravel a bit more, which is you talked about how the company Infosys believed in giving somebody the rope and giving them the opportunity, and it's up to the person to go unleash. In a way, there are two ways you could go make management hires as a manager, as a leader. Somebody who's been there, done that, and seen the movie, and now you're getting them in for an experience. But now you're talking about maybe getting an athlete who has the potential, may not have frankly done that before, but you're actually giving them the keys to the kingdom and saying, show me what you can do. How do you make hiring decisions in that spectrum of been there, done that to athlete? Where are you in that hiring process?
Look, another area where art and science come together mysteriously. And look, I've had my share of bad hiring decisions, perhaps bad leadership of good hires, and then good leadership of good hires as well. So the formula I'm currently working on, because this formula is constantly improving through machine learning, effectively, you keep learning and improving the formula, is very simple. I'm looking for people with high empathy. We started with empathy because they're listening well. I'm looking for people with high learnability, that they're always big, learning a new skill and learning something new. And it could be learning jujitsu or something else, but simply people with curiosity enough to find out, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Can I learn it? And then learning it. And then lastly, people who have experience at scaling stuff. Because in today's world, there are lots of people with good ideas and good ambitions and good energy. And then if there's some experience in scaling things in a slightly different way, I think that's exciting for me. So the empathy, the learnability, which, by the way, Infosys at that time always hired for learnability, and this ability to scale, these 2-3 things are high on my radar. Besides the usual things that we look for effectively you're looking for people young at heart. I'm not getting younger in soon, so but younger at heart then gives you the latitude for those kind of qualities, if that makes sense.
It totally does. So high empathy, learning, and experience in scaling. I think that sounds like a really solid formula. I can't think of holes there. Um, of course, there's also looking for competencies in the day-to-day work that you're being hired for. But then going back to the empathy and learning, are there mechanisms that you put in place, which it's not just you, but also now you have to scale that as well in a way that your organization is hiring for empathy and learning and scale. So I'm very curious on mechanisms, whether it be in hiring or whether it be in rewarding certain behaviors that you've put in place to actually build that organization full of empathy and curiosity.
No, so look, Mars, I was fortunate when I joined Mars in particular, or Infosys before that, always has been a great place to work in all the classic rankings. But at Mars, I found something interesting. The culture of Mars, being a private family company, just happens to be a very warm culture. We hug each other. We laugh a lot together. It's just a very nice, I mean, we sell candy and pet food and pet care. So it's just a very nice, happy culture per se. There's a lot of warmth in it. Everybody hugs you. Pre-COVID, now we're a little more careful, but yeah, I'll get a hug once in a while, even now, which is fun. And I've never experienced anything like this. I've not experienced such human intimacy from people in every room who had 20 passports, bad hairstyles, sometimes bad sense of humor, but a sense of warmth and affection for everybody that was unlike any others. So that's a raw material. We unleashed what we call as a user-centricity movement. So a groundswell design thinking movement that allowed us to then bring consumers into the room and empathize with them, or empathize with the end user, or the line manager in the factory who's on the production line, or so on. So that movement has now scaled to more than 20,000 Mars associates who immerse themselves, taught themselves design thinking, made empathy systemic. And the hypothesis is simple. Most people in large companies, I think, are solving the wrong problem. They may be digital, maybe not, but they're solving the wrong problem. With empathy, you just frame the problem better. I'll give you an example. Right now, the background noise you hear is people in my backyard. There's some dead trees that had to be removed. I'm sorry, I'm digressing. I'll show you this example real quick. These, some people came in, there's some dead trees in the backyard, and they said, I'm going to charge you $500 and cut all these, dead trees. I said, $500 a tree, that's too much. The second contractor came in and said, I'll charge you $400 a tree. I have a better equipment, and so I will cut them faster, but you have dozens of dead trees because of some things going on. I'll cut those trees. And the third one walked in, this one, who was actually doing the work. He said, what is the problem you're solving for? And I said, well, I don't know, the trees fall. He said, though that particular tree does not fall, boom, like this. The branches fall off, the root systems are strong, they fall slowly. But 4 of those trees are neighboring your neighbor's yard. All you need to do is knock off those 4. The others, since you're not going back into the woods, are going to naturally fall. And this is a far more desirable, feasible, and a viable arrangement for me. So, long story short, he empathized and he tried to tease out the real problem I was trying to solve for. And if all our large corporations or small corporations really focus on the right problem to solve for, I have a feeling this whole empathy thing can be taken to a completely new level, no? I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I actually loved that story, and I loved how you actually contextualized it, frankly. It is so powerful to hear that. I think a lot of time, I was actually going to ask you, Sandeep, that saying a contrarian point of view would say, empathy is great, but at the end of the day, it is a dog-eat-dog world. There's new entrants coming in. We got to maintain our market share and turf here. But what you're saying is that empathy is is a part of the core part of the job that you do. It has helped you and your team identify the core of the problems that need to be solved, and truly get in getting to the root of the problem. And so that way, busy is not necessarily equal to progress. You're actually seeing real progress by ensuring that you're getting to the root of the problem. I love that. I think that's a great example as well that you gave.
And there's lots of scars in my consulting life. A very large retailer asked me to build a massive data lake with all their data repositories, and they said, let's create a data cafe. And when we create a data cafe, on the lobby floor of our entrance, all our business users will come and ask questions. And I did, and it was a multiple petabyte data lake. It was early at that time, 15 years back. And I said, wow, this is going to be a revolution. And I collected all the data and put it in an open source data. It was beautiful. Nobody came. Nobody came to ask questions. And so in Mars, we've been very conscious, and the Mars leadership team has been extremely conscious about the first step in going digital being ask the freaking right question closest to the consumer, the end user, and so on. So empathy, which, as I said, is a native Mars superpower, is now being unlocked for that purpose, and we are hoping to make a dent with it.
That's great, Sandeep. Going a bit orthogonal here, many of us end up learning from failures and incredibly difficult situations that truly end up defining a lot of who we are. And I've certainly had a portion of mine in my life. Are there certain challenging situations or failures that you look back and you go, wow, that really taught me something? And because you actually just went through this data cafe thing, which is great. Are there other so yeah, any other stories to share there?
Well, lots. I remember, in MBA school, not easily getting my summer placements. I didn't have my grades, and without my grades of the first term grades, I was useless in interviews. And I went through like 2 days of not landing summer placements, and I think cried for the first time as an adult, because remember, you were in a race and you want to get ahead, and you go through 2 days, and people you thought were not as good were getting placed. There's something wrong in the way I was interviewing. There's something wrong in the way I was reacting. In Citi, I had one operational nightmare which cost the bank a little bit of money, and I felt personally accountable for it. Anyway, so, and I can go on. I mean, there's plenty to count, but and I think I probably have not made my biggest mistakes yet and worst yet. But I think each one of the situations, first, you hate it. I hate failure. I like the idea of failing fast and all that good stuff. But I think the best thing to do is to, I guess, first take time to curse, to let it out. And then this idea of taking a blank piece of paper, literally, I'm not kidding, just a blank piece of paper and start writing has helped me. And start writing and focusing on what to do next. I don't know whether I do a great loss analysis of the failure as to what went wrong, but I like when once I start writing what to do next, then things become clearer. And then eventually things become better. And actually then eventually things become better than they ever were supposed to be. So I think that's usually been my hack, but we are hacking every time we fail. Does that make sense?
It totally does. I think in Amazon, we had a similar thing where every failure needed to have an RCA and an RCR, which is root cause analysis and root cause resolution. And as you said, RCA was actually very simple and common, which is just put down the timeline. There's no subjectivity, just tell me what happened. That's it, that's the RCA. And RCR is where the subjectivity goes in and judgment goes in on what are the types of things that you have to do. I don't think it is a hack. I personally believe that's such such an important tool that every leader should have, especially in this day and age of failing fast and learning and all that stuff. So thanks for sharing that. And is that something that you also have put in your organization at Mars?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this idea of being comfortable with failure and failing fast and cheap is important. We have unleashed tens of thousands of sprints in the last 4 years, and I think half of them have failed, to be honest. I don't know how many people are listening to this from Mars, but I'm going to admit on this wonderful interview that half of what we have done in Mars has failed. Having said that, I think they've really led on to us driving better campaigns, better projects at scale. And some of our best successes now are coming through that, through that learning experience. We are wiser for that experience.
And so in a way that you're almost wearing that as a medal, saying we failed. And actually that I resonate that with a lot with my background in Amazon. Amazon used to wear that as a medal, saying we fail a lot. In fact, I think one of Bezos's letters actually talked about failures. He writes this yearly shareholder letter. One of them was about failures. So how do you then ensure that the failures don't end up sort of costing you or your team their jobs and Mars or your organization a ton of money and or opportunity, however you want to put it, the cost of failure? How do you sort of make sure that you're taking the right bets and so that you're able to always tilt it in favor of the learnings where you're actually, and that makes you faster as opposed to the cost of failure, which ends up getting you to your peril?
The only lever that we can control is the timeline of the project. Let me explain. I walked into many rooms in my consulting life and in Mars where people are, with consultants driving a 5-year roadmap of a project. How might we drive an omni-channel, delightful end-to-end consumer experience? 5 years. Now, if you sit back and drink with these people at night, you'll realize that most people are trying to, frankly, make it to the weekend. 2 coffees and 1 drink every day, and they can't even imagine what next week will be like. So humans are interesting, at least in my analysis, where we are pretending to know what we will be 5 years from now. The interview question, tell me what you'll be 5 years from now. Now, Guru, you're a very successful entrepreneur. 5 years back, did you have this picture so clearly in your head?
No way.
Anyway, so the first thing we did in Mars is we said no project should exceed 12 weeks. And now we're trying to make it 6 weeks and 4 weeks even. It was very controversial when we began because it just didn't compute for a lot of people. It didn't even, and there was a lot of misunderstanding. But what if I'm doing a Workday implementation? That takes, 18 months anyway. But I think, really trying to drive definition only for 12 weeks and not more, that means you're always walking in the fog. And all you're saying is, dude, you can see only 3 steps ahead. Take those freaking 3 steps. Do not imagine the other steps beforehand. That has helped because then the failures become less expensive. What do you know? You took 3 steps in the wrong direction. Take them back. Move the different way. The worst are in projects, and look, we have our share of those, where you've gone 5 years in the wrong direction and then figured out when the fog cleared, oh my God. And then it's all kinds of positioning and boardroom antics to save yourself from there. And look, I may still get fired from companies for failures, but I'm just hoping we don't take too many steps in the wrong direction.
Sandeep, this reminds me of the interview, a podcast interview you're doing with the Chief Technology Officer of Walmart, Suresh Kumar, who was actually my boss at Amazon. And he actually put it in, he talked about it and talked about how he tries to keep the blast radius small enough that if something explodes, that it's not going to bring out the entire home, that it's a small little blast radius. I think you kind of just put some more color to it, some more mechanism to it, which is, as a technologist, as a leader, where time is money, that you essentially create that small little blast radius by identifying number of weeks you're spending on a project before you say yes or no, go forward or pull back. I think that's great. That's thanks for sharing that that mechanism.
Suresh always a much more explosive leader than me, clearly, literally. So yeah, makes sense.
So I want to also now come to now Mars. How did you now become the CDO of Mars? How did that opportunity come about, and how did you land over here?
So I was president at Infosys, in many ways running a third of the business and really enjoying it. Mars came along and really wanted at first they wanted a CIO who wasn't a traditional CIO. So they didn't want a career CIO. They wanted someone who could could be from outside and disrupt a little bit. And I said, no, who wants to be a CIO? Nobody likes CIOs, and it's not worth it. I think they kept coming back with an idea of driving digital transformation. And I asked them, what do you mean by it? And they said, we don't know. And I said, great, that makes two of us. I don't know either. Every interaction with Mars leaders, I'll give you an example. I came to interview the CEO and I had breakfast with him at this, pretty, ordinary restaurant. Then I went and met him in his office as well. I walked up to the reception, and at the reception I said, hey, can I meet the CEO? And he came running from his open office and hugged me. That was weird. Like, I'm come to interview you and you're hugging me. But that 5 seconds, and you make up your mind. You think, these are the kind of people I want to hang with. They're humble, they're nice, they already love you, or they love you before you earn it. They trust you before you earn it. And then all you need to do is, either misplace their trust or not. So I really fell in love with the culture, the interviewing process, with the company, with literally the company in the company. And they treated you, it's a family company, but in more ways than one, they treated you like family to start with. And yes, there's high accountability, there's high performance. It's a very successful company. It's innovating out of my mind. It's just mind-blowing innovation. And I said, yeah, let's frame this as a chief digital officer. I am the first chief digital officer at Mars. They never had this role before. And essentially that's an excuse. The title is an excuse to help drive transformation, which this company has determined to. In the last 4 years, I've never seen more intent, more empathy than in any other companies that I've consulted with. And so we are seeing some good impact as a leadership team.
That's amazing. And can you double click on the word transformation? What does that mean to you, and why is that so important for a company like Mars?
So that is the other thing. We didn't come into Mars with a framework saying, oh, this is digital transformation. By the way, there are 5 steps, and Gartner has it 3 ways. No, there was none of that. We said we'll spend the first 100 days really understanding how should we help define digital transformation Mars. We went to e-commerce people. They said, oh, digital transformation is e-commerce. Commerce IQ probably will subscribe to that. Some other people said D2C is digital commerce or digital transformation. But when you went to the supply chain folks, they said, yeah, dude, if you digitize this factory, we can produce very differently and in a very agile way. So that's digital transformation. R&D wanted to digitize innovation, and every part of Mars had a different idea around how to go digital. And then when you went to the consumer, they said, hey, I want you guys to come to me in more ways. I can't even think about the future. How will you engage with me? And so we then framed something very simple. We said, actually, all Martians, we have 135,000 Martians. We call ourselves Martians. We actually know what we are trying to do. We're just sometimes slow. So we said, let's frame digital transformation as going faster, and not like 10% faster, but 100 times faster. So we called it 100x. Now, the beauty of this was everybody got it. Most people were not threatened by it, as in, this guy is not coming to replace me. He's helping me go 100 times faster, whatever it is that I'm trying to do. And that helped. And then we broke that down further into three simple steps, saying in whatever you're doing, you frame problem with user centricity, with design thinking, you solve it using technology, data, and analytics. Once you solve it, you scale it using automation so you can find the next problem. So in Mars, we actually, and this is created for Mars, in Mars, by Martians, 100x, find problem, solve problem, scale solution, or an automate solution, find next problem. And every sprint is literally follows that. Then follows the specific programs around B2C or price promo optimization or other things. But that's how the digital transformation had been set up. And then each business translated that into their own sort of purpose and different statements. That's how we've come about this story. Does that make sense?
It does. So you're basically putting a currency to the speed of doing things, as opposed to doing something very different, which may actually move you away from authentically who you are as a company.
If you zoom out, Guru, and look in the 1960s, what did Walmart, a company I really admire, do? They looked at consumer needs who wanted variety and convenience at a low cost, and created this store and supply chain infrastructure. And their first 60 billion, when you measure cars, you say 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. Let's look at companies. 0 to 60 billion, Walmart hit in 1988. So it took 26 years from inception. And what Walmart was doing is listening and responding, finding, solving, scaling. That's what they were doing, the same digital engine. Fast forward to 2012, you were probably in Amazon then. Amazon hit 60 billion in 2012. And what did Amazon do? Amazon did the find solve in a very different way. And Amazon took 12 years, 0 to 60 in 12 years. Yeah. Now look at what's happening through COVID. The one irrefutable, irreversible consumer trend through the last 2 years. Every other trend, whether you eat out, whether you eat at restaurants, has gone to and fro. The one trend that has not changed, you spend 1 more hour at an average. All consumers in the world, at an average, spend 1 more hour a day in mobile phone apps. Okay, and if you don't, Guru, then talk to your neighbor. They probably do 2 hours to compensate for your average. So everybody's spending 1 more hour in apps, and the one app that's taken the most time out of that 1 hour is TikTok. And if you count the revenues of TikTok with the shop button now in it, and the Shopify partnership and the Douyin commerce numbers, they'll hit 60 billion in 4 years. So 0 to 60 in 4. So 0 to 60 in 26, 0 to 60 in 12, and 0 to 60 in 4. What does that teach us? Why Walmart, why 26, 12, and 4? At least the way I look at it is they're all doing the same thing. They're listening, they're building and responding. TikTok listens, builds, and responds in a 30-second cycle. Literally, the next 30-second video has listened to the previous experience you had, and it's just faster in that cycle. I mean, come back to Mars or any company driving digital transformation, speed in listening and responding is perhaps the only thing that matters then.
Wow, Sandeep, that is, yeah, I'm sure there'll be a bunch of people sort of rewinding 2 minutes here and listening it over again. This was great. I love the speed being the cornerstone of transformation. That's great. And actually, that also answers a lot of questions when you actually go through transformation projects and you start to do certain things in a different way. Then are you really touching who you are as an authenticity of that company? And by just moving faster and being authentic in who you are, that just solves that. So I think that's a really well said a few sentences there, Sandeep. And on that, maybe you talked about things which are changing, the behaviors that are changing. What are your predictions for e-commerce and retail over the next 1 decade?
So, I mean, my Chinese counterparts and friends and team members always give me a clue of what's coming ahead. We are seeing live streaming commerce really take off in a crazy high scale way in China. I think there's some crazy numbers even over the last few days to report from live streaming commerce. And then the other thing happening is this, people talk about the metaverse and smart contracts and crypto, and I've been a huge skeptic saying, what is the problem you're solving for? Same thing, man. What is the problem you're solving for? And then I'm seeing Chipotle recently report that Taco on Roblox had 14 million people claiming it in hours, and so on. So, and then Gucci sold a bag, and a few other Roblox experiences became interesting. So I'm seeing a convergence of 3 or 4 things. AI at scale, clearly on consumer platforms. TikTok's a good example, and so on. Smart contracts or crypto or NFTs, where it makes sense from a physical and metaphysical experience. You can call it Web 3.0, you can call it metaverse, but it's real. And I was wrong. Consumers actually dig this. It is part of brand building in a very, very different way. Media platforms absolutely disaggregating. I was with the CDOs of the top retailers in this country, and they're all hiving off their media businesses as full-on businesses. So now you have so many media platforms to look at, live streaming commerce. But the one thing common, the thread that links all of this together, is faster listening and response cycles. That's what created TikTok. That's all. I mean, TikTok, you can analyze it and make it extremely mythical, but it's just a faster listening and response cycle. And these other areas and experiences just create that. You can get your Gucci bag right now in a Roblox game in the next 1 minute. Otherwise, you'll have to go find one. And that's just a faster listening and response cycle, period.
That's great. I love the simplicity that you're driving in this. It's great. And finally, as the world is opening up here, Sandeep, apart from more hugs, what is one thing that you are looking to do and accomplish in your professional or personal life as the world opens up?
I have not met my parents for 2 years in Baroda. They are in Baroda. We started this conversation with Baroda Guru. And I miss hanging with them. So I'm hoping I can visit them soon with our extended families and not in this, sort of half mask, distanced, somewhat inhibitive way. I hope I can just meet my family. I work in a family company, but I hope I can meet my real family and just hug everybody and not worry about all the worries we have. That would be cool.
That's awesome. With that note, Sandeep, thank you so much for being with us. This was a fantastic podcast. Lots of learnings, things that we can put in our daily lives. So really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me, Guru, and all the best to you and your wonderful company.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, it would mean so much to us if you could take a moment to share this show on LinkedIn. To learn more how Guru and his team can help optimize and grow your e-commerce business on Amazon and other retailers, visit commerceiq.ai. Thanks for listening.